The violet sky above Luminara Prime stretched endlessly, a canvas painted by the light of 3 moons. The crystal spires of the Etherian Palace gleamed like living stars, refracting the glow into cascading waves of silver and blue. Below, a grand hall pulsed with the hum of alien dignitaries, Etherians, Centurions, and emissaries from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. It was meant to be a night of diplomacy, of forging fragile alliances. Instead, it was the night everything changed. Commander William Sterling, clad in the sharp insignia of Earth's Terran diplomatic corps, stood motionless at the center of the chamber. Across from him, Queen Guara of the Aean Royal House, her silver skin radiating a faint bioelectric glow, regarded him with an expression of cold fury. At her side, Princess Kyara, her golden eyes wide with equal parts defiance and fear, clutched his hand. Their intertwined fingers shimmered with a telltale current of synchronized energy, a sign unmistakable to any Etherian eye. A bond had been formed, and it was irreversible. The queen exhaled sharply, her regal bearing unshaken. So the whispers were true, she murmured. You've truly bonded with the human. Murmurs erupted among the assembled nobles. The weight of their gazes pressed down upon William like gravity itself. A bond between a human and an Etherian was unheard of, impossible, even. Yet here they stood, evidence of an anomaly that could reshape the balance of power. Across the chamber, Prince Kaelor of the Centurian Empire, Kyara's betrothed, seethed with unrestrained rage. His iridescent scales shimmered under the crystalline lights, his hands curling into fists. A political match between the Etherians and Centurions had been arranged for years, a cornerstone of galactic stability. And now it had been shattered in a single night. You, insect, Kaelor spat, his voice thick with contempt as he advanced on William. You think you can steal what is rightfully mine? Before William could react, Kyara stepped forward, shielding him. I am not yours, Kaelor. I never was, she said, her voice steel-wrapped in silk. And this bond? It is not something we chose. It happened. You know what that means. Silence rippled through the court. Every Etherian present knew the implications. Etherian bonding was not a trivial affair. It was not a simple emotion, nor a fleeting attachment. It was a merging of bioelectric fields, a synchronization at the most fundamental level. It could not be undone. Kaelor's lip curled in a snarl. Then the only course is ritual combat, he declared. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Queen Guara's golden eyes narrowed. You invoke the right of combat? Kaelor's nostrils flared. I do. If the human has truly claimed the princess, let him prove it, in battle to the death. William's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. He had come to the stars as a diplomat. But it seemed, tonight, he would have to be a warrior. 1 hour. That was all the time Commander William Sterling had to prepare for a fight against an elite Centurion warrior, a species known for their brutal combat prowess, their dense, nearly impervious exoskeletal plating, their strength 3 times that of a human. William wasn't an inexperienced fighter. His training in the Terran diplomatic corps included hand-to-hand combat, firearms, and battlefield tactics. But against a Centurion? That was like throwing a wolf into a pit with a war beast. Yet he could not refuse. Refusal would mean dishonor, not just for him, but for Kyara. The political fallout would be catastrophic. As he stood in the palace's underground training chamber, Master Therein, the queen's personal combat instructor, circled him like a predator. The older Etherian was built like a living blade, his silver skin scarred from past battles, his golden eyes calculating. You have a death wish, human, Therein remarked dryly, tossing William a sleek combat suit woven with experimental Etherian energy filaments. But if you're going to die, you might as well die properly equipped. William caught the suit, flexing his fingers against the reinforced material. I don't plan on dying. Therein let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Then learn fast. The training was brutal. Etherians did not rely on brute force. They were precise, their combat style fluid, using their bioelectric fields to sense and counter an opponent's moves before they happened. Kyara's bond with William had already started to awaken a similar ability in him, but it was raw, untamed. Control the current, Therein barked. Don't fight it, channel it. William grit his teeth as another surge of energy flared beneath his skin. The combat suit amplified it, making his reflexes sharper, his speed faster. But it was unstable, flickering between power and chaos. Kyara, watching from the chamber's edge, reached out mentally through their bond. You can do this. He met her gaze, and something clicked. In that moment, their fields aligned. The raw energy smooth, no longer wild and unpredictable. A weapon, honed. Therein stepped back, eyes widening ever so slightly. Interesting. Before he could say more, the signal chimed. Time was up. The duel awaited. The ritual combat arena was carved into the crystalline cliffs outside the palace, a sacred battlefield where honor was decided in blood. William stepped onto the white sand, his combat suit humming with power, the connection to Kyara a steady pulse at the edge of his mind. Across from him, Prince Kaelor stood, clad in ceremonial battle armor, his scaly hands curling into razor-edged fists. A hush fell over the gathered nobility. Queen Guara raised her hand. The challenge is issued. The terms are clear. Victory will decide the princess's fate. She paused, eyes flicking between them. Then, with a single motion, begin. Kaelor moved like a thunderclap, a blur of motion too fast for the eye to follow. But William was already moving. The bond with Kyara sharpened his reflexes to inhuman precision. He sidestepped at the last instant, pivoting, redirecting Kaelor's strike into empty air. The Centurion let out a growl of frustration. You're faster than you should be. William smirked. Good observation. Kaelor lunged again, his claws aimed for William's throat, but William rolled beneath him, his movements fluid, guided by a current of instinct that wasn't entirely his own. Kyara's voice echoed in his mind. Left, now. He obeyed without hesitation. His strike landed square against Kaelor's unarmored flank, the first blow landed against a Centurion in recorded history. Gasps rippled through the audience. Kaelor staggered back, eyes wide with disbelief. But this was only the beginning, and William knew the battle ahead was not just for survival. It was for the future of the galaxy itself. Kaelor's eyes burned with fury. The Centurion Prince had never been struck in ritual combat, not by an equal, and certainly not by a human. A growl rumbled from deep in his chest, the sound reverberating through the crystalline arena like a storm-given voice. But William had no time for satisfaction. He shifted his stance, instinct screaming at him to stay ahead of Kaelor's next move. His heart pounded, but beneath it all, there was a pulse of something deeper, a steady, rhythmic current of power, tethering him to Kyara. I am with you, her voice whispered through their bond. And he could feel it. The bioelectric field they now shared had heightened his awareness, made him faster, sharper. It was an advantage no human had ever wielded against a Centurion. Kaelor wiped a streak of golden blood from his lip and exhaled sharply. Then, in the span of a breath, he was upon William again. William ducked. The force of Kaelor's strike sent a shockwave through the air, cracking the crystalline ground where he had stood mere moments before. Had that connected, it would have shattered his ribs. The Centurion was no longer attacking with discipline. He was enraged and reckless. William pivoted, using Kaelor's own momentum against him, dodging another strike and landing a precise counterpunch to his opponent's exposed side. The crowd gasped again. Kaelor stumbled, his powerful frame momentarily thrown off balance. William pressed the advantage. His combat suit hummed with energy, Kyara's presence strengthening his movements, guiding him. With each motion, the connection between them solidified further. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a proving ground for the bond itself. Kaelor bared his teeth. I will end this, human. Then, with a roar, he threw himself forward, his iridescent scales darkening as his body began to glow. William barely had time to react before Kaelor's fist erupted with energy, a lethal Centurion technique known as the Shatter Strike. If it landed, it would kill him instantly. Chapter 5. A Bond Forged in Fire. Move. Kyara's warning slammed into William's mind like a command written into his nerves. Without thinking, he obeyed. Kaelor's Shatter Strike tore through the air inches from William's face, the shockwave blasting a crater into the arena floor. William spun, redirecting his own energy, and threw all his weight into a counterattack, one perfectly timed and guided by Kyara's presence. His fist connected. Kaelor's body seized. A ripple of unseen power erupted between them, Kyara's energy fully merging with William's own, the raw force overloading Kaelor's bioelectric field. The Centurion Prince crashed to the ground, his massive frame twitching, his armor scorched with residual energy. Silence. The arena was deathly still. Then Queen Guara's voice rang out. The battle is decided. The words sent a shockwave through the crowd. William had won. But victory was not the end. It was only the beginning. Kaelor's defeat shattered more than just his pride. It threw the entire political balance into turmoil. Within hours, the Centurian Empire withdrew their envoys from Luminara Prime. Rumors spread across the stars of a brewing war, one that could tear the fragile alliances apart. Yet William knew there was something deeper at play. Behind Kaelor's rage. Behind the Centurion withdrawal. Behind the assassins who had attacked their bonding ceremony. The Shadow Consortium, a hidden force that had spent centuries manipulating the galaxy, keeping species divided, weak, governable. They had feared what William and Kyara represented, unity. And now? Now they were coming for them both. The holographic projection flickered before them, a rotating image of the Centurion fleet, positioned along the borders of Aean space like a coiled serpent, poised to strike. From the observation deck of the Etherian Royal Palace, William Sterling studied the display with narrowed eyes. The diplomatic corps had trained him to recognize posturing versus intent, and this was not mere intimidation. The Centurian Empire was preparing for war. Kyara stood beside him, her arms crossed, golden eyes reflecting the flickering projection. Through their bond, he could feel the storm of emotion swirling beneath her poised exterior: anger, frustration, fear. "This isn't just about you defeating Kaelor," she murmured. "It's something bigger. Someone is pushing for this war." William nodded grimly. The Shadow Consortium. The name hung between them like a curse. Queen Guara, standing at the center of the chamber, remained silent for a long moment, studying the display. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that sent a chill through the room. "They have always lurked beneath the surface," she said, whispering in the ears of kings, twisting the fates of empires. But until now, they remained in the shadows. This. She gestured at the hologram. This is something else. A bold move. A desperate one. William exhaled slowly, piecing together the strands. "They tried to eliminate me in the arena. When that failed, they tried to assassinate us at the bonding ceremony. Now they're forcing the Centurion Empire into war. If they can't prevent our union, they'll ensure it becomes the spark that burns the galaxy." Kyara's hands curled into fists. "We can't let that happen." Guara turned to face them fully. "Agreed." She stepped closer, her golden gaze locking onto William's. "The bond between you and my daughter has changed everything. The Shadow Consortium sees it as a threat, and they are right to fear it." A pulse of energy surged through William's body, Kyara's bioelectric field instinctively responding to his own. Their synchronization had only grown since the arena battle. He could feel her emotions, sense her thoughts just beneath the surface. They were more than bonded now. They were becoming something new. Guara's gaze flicked between them, as if sensing the same thing. Then she made her decision. "I am sending you both to the Centurion capital," she declared. Kyara stiffened. "Mother." "The Centurion Emperor will not listen to an Etherian delegation," Guara cut her off. "Nor will he trust a message sent through diplomatic channels." She turned back to William. "But he might listen to you." William met her gaze, understanding exactly what she was asking. "You want me to go as an envoy?" "A shadow envoy," Guara corrected. "Not through official channels. Those are already compromised." She gestured to the warships displayed before them. "You must go to Centurion Prime and convince the Emperor that his son's loss was not an act of war, but an act of deception." Kyara hesitated for only a moment before speaking. "I'm going with him." Guara exhaled sharply, but she did not argue. Instead, she nodded once. "You leave at dawn." The stealth cruiser hummed quietly as it left Etherian space, slipping into the dark folds of hyperspace. William sat at the controls, scanning the readings. Every light flashed green for now, at least. The ship's cloaking systems would keep them hidden from Centurion patrols, but once they reached the capital, their real challenge would begin. Behind him, Kyara was silent, gazing out at the swirling void beyond the viewport. Through their bond, he could feel her tension, the weight of the mission pressing down on her. He turned his chair toward her. "What's on your mind?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quiet. "Centurion Prime is not a place of mercy, William. If we fail, they won't send us back to Luminara in chains." Her golden eyes met his. "They will execute us both." He studied her, then reached out, taking her hand in his. The warmth of their bond surged between them. "We won't fail," he said simply. She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You sound so sure." "I have to be." He squeezed her fingers gently. "And besides, if things go sideways, I still have you." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "That, you do." Their moment of calm was shattered by the sudden blaring of alarms. William turned back to the controls, his stomach twisting as he read the data. "Incoming ships. Fast." Kyara was already moving to the weapons console. "They found us." William's fingers flew over the controls. "Impossible. We're cloaked." The ship rocked violently, the unmistakable impact of a disruptor blast rippling through the hull. Kyara's voice was sharp. "Well, someone doesn't care." William's jaw clenched. He brought up the external scans, his heart stopping at the sight of the ships surrounding them. They weren't Centurion. They weren't Etherian. They were something else entirely. A shadow flickered through the void. Then, without warning, a transmission came through. A voice smooth as silk, cold as a blade, filled the cockpit. "You have been most troublesome, Commander Sterling." The screen flickered, and a face appeared. A tall, cloaked figure, its features half hidden in shadow, its eyes glinting with something not quite human, not quite alien. Kyara's breath caught. "That's..." William exhaled. "The Shadow Consortium," he finished. The figure smiled. "At last," it said. "We meet properly." The Shadow Consortium's envoy stared at them through the flickering holographic transmission, its face half obscured beneath the folds of an elaborate, darkened hood. The glow of distant stars reflected in its unnatural, silver-black eyes, orbs that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. William had faced warlords, politicians, and assassins, but never had he felt the quiet, suffocating pressure that this being exuded, a presence that felt wrong, as if something was whispering from beyond the veil of space itself. From the co-pilot's chair, Kyara had gone rigid, her bioelectric field flaring instinctively, casting a faint aura of etheric gold around her. He could feel her reaction through their bond, revulsion, unease, recognition. She had seen this thing's kind before. The figure inclined its head slightly. "Princess Kyara." "Commander Sterling. How curious that fate has intertwined you so thoroughly." William kept his expression neutral, his training taking over. "Show no weakness. Keep them talking. Find an opening." "Can't say I'm thrilled about the company," he said evenly. "You seem awfully interested in us for an organization that supposedly doesn't exist." The figure chuckled. The sound was wrong, almost like a vibration echoing through multiple frequencies at once. "We exist where we must, Commander, and we erase what must not." Kyara's grip tightened on the console. "You tried to have us killed." The figure let out a soft sigh. "We tried to correct an anomaly. The bond between you was never meant to happen. It is unnatural." William felt his blood run cold. They weren't just talking about political consequences. They meant the bond itself, something deeper, something biological. Something they knew about before even William and Kyara did. He exchanged a glance with her. She understood, too. Kyara stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "Why does it threaten you so much?" The figure tilted its head, studying them. Then it whispered something in a language that neither of them had ever heard before. But somehow, William felt it shiver across his skin, like a thought planted directly into his mind. Kyara gasped. He felt her field waver for a fraction of a second. The figure smiled thinly. "The bond has always been meant to divide, not unite. What you have done is an aberration, and aberrations must be purged." Before William could react, the ship rocked violently, the telltale impact of an energy tether locking onto their hull. Kyara turned to the weapons console. "We're caught in a gravlock." William's pulse quickened. The Shadow Consortium wasn't here to talk. They were here to take them. He turned back to the figure. "You think we're just going to let you drag us off?" The envoy's silver-black eyes shimmered. "You have no choice, Commander. Your fate was sealed the moment you touched the princess." William's gut twisted at the implication, but he pushed it aside. He didn't have time to unravel their cryptic riddles. He needed a way out. His fingers danced across the ship's controls. The engines were locked. The weapons were disabled. The enemy ship's systems were overriding everything in real time. Their technology far beyond even the Etherians' most advanced countermeasures. William's mind raced. He had only one chance. He reached out, not with his hands, but through the bond itself. Kyara's eyes snapped to his. She understood immediately. Together, she closed her eyes, and their fields synchronized. William felt the pulse of power surge between them, like two circuits finally completing a full loop. He turned that energy outward, into the ship, into the controls, into the very systems the Shadow Consortium was trying to override. The figure's head snapped upward, as if they could sense it happening. What? Then, with a deafening snap of power, the cockpit lights flared, energy surging through the ship's core. The gravlock holding them in place collapsed in an explosion of shattered force fields. Kyara's hands flew across the controls. Engaging hyperdrive, now. The ship lurched violently, and the stars outside elongated into streaks of light. They were free. For now. The cockpit remained silent except for the hum of the hyperdrive. William exhaled a slow breath, feeling his pulse settle, though the weight of what had just happened still pressed into him. The Shadow Consortium had anticipated their bond. They knew something about it, something they hadn't revealed. Kyara turned to him, her golden eyes dark with worry. "Did you feel that?" He nodded. Whatever that envoy was, it wasn't just speaking. It was in our heads. Kyara's expression tightened. Their words weren't just words. They carried something else. A frequency. A command. She swallowed. And for a moment, my body almost responded. A chill ran down William's spine. He had felt it, too. That whisper, threading through his consciousness. Almost like a forgotten memory being reawakened. What the hell had they stumbled into? He turned to the NAV console, scanning the route ahead. They were still en route to Centurian Prime, but now their mission had changed. It wasn't just about preventing war anymore. It was about surviving whatever the consortium had planned for them. Kyara's voice was quiet. "We need answers." William met her gaze. "Then we start at the source." He adjusted their course slightly, pulling up a secondary set of coordinates, ones buried deep within the Terran Diplomatic Corps' classified archives. Kyara's brows furrowed. "Where are we going?" William's jaw tightened. "To the only place in the galaxy where people have survived an encounter with the consortium." Kyara's breath hitched. The ghost city of Delmara 9. The name lingered between them, heavy with the weight of unspoken horrors. Because if the rumors were true, Delmara 9 was the graveyard of an empire, a planet where the consortium had erased an entire civilization overnight. And if anyone was still alive there, they would have the answers. Or they would have something much worse. The stealth cruiser streaked through hyperspace, leaving the shattered remnants of their near capture behind. But the threat of the Shadow Consortium lingered in the back of William's mind like a cold breath on his neck. Kyara sat across from him in the dimly lit cockpit, her golden eyes distant, unreadable. Through their bond, he felt her mind churning, trying to make sense of what had just happened, what had been whispered into them. He cleared his throat. "You've heard of Delmara 9 before." Kyara exhaled slowly, brushing a strand of silver-white hair from her face. "Only in fragments. My mother never speaks of it, and when I asked the royal archivists, they claimed it was just a myth." William tapped the hollow interface, bringing up the official records of Delmara 9, or what little remained. A once thriving world, erased in a single night. The reports were conflicting, incomplete, as if something had deliberately stripped away the truth. He scrolled further. Delmara 9 had once belonged to the Saran Dominion, an empire that rivaled the Etherians and Centurions in power. Then, without warning, the entire civilization vanished. No war, no disease, no natural disaster, just emptiness. What the hell happened here? William muttered. Kyara stared at the faded images, hollow cities of gleaming towers, now abandoned, half swallowed by dust and time. If the consortium was involved, they didn't just kill the people, William said, voice low. They erased them from history. A silence fell between them. Then, the navigation console beeped. They were nearing the coordinates. William straightened, dropping out of hyperspace. The stars shuddered and reformed, and the ghostly, half-lit planet of Delmara 9 appeared before them. A dead world. Yet as they drew closer, the ship's sensors flickered wildly, picking up something that shouldn't be there. Life signs. Kyara's fingers danced over the controls. That's impossible. William checked the readings again. No mistake. The scanners detected movement within the ruins. Not large populations, but enough to suggest something was still alive down there. If something survived, he murmured. Then it's not supposed to, Kyara finished. A chill settled over them. They had come for answers. But what they found might be something much worse. Their ship descended through the dead atmosphere, mist swirling around the skeletal remains of a once great city. Towers of blackened metal jutted into the sky, their surfaces scorched, as if the very fabric of reality had been burned away. William felt the air in his lungs thicken. A strange pressure settled against his skin, a presence unseen, yet inescapable. Kyara stiffened beside him. There's something wrong here. William felt it too. The bond between them was usually like a steady current, an energy that tethered them together. But here, it was fractured, flickering, as if something in this place was trying to pull them apart. William gritted his teeth. Let's find out who, or what, survived. They armed themselves and stepped onto the desolate streets of Delmara 9. Ahead, within the ruins, something moved. A shadow, a whisper, waiting for them, and watching. The air on Delmara 9 felt wrong. It was thick, not just with dust, but with something intangible, a weight, a pressure, as if the very atmosphere resented their presence. The sky overhead was a deep, bruised purple, the light of a dying sun barely filtering through the twisting, jagged ruins. William and Kyara moved cautiously, weapons at the ready. The streets were lined with ghostly structures, remnants of a civilization that had been erased in a single night. And yet, something still lived here. The life signs flickered on their scanners, erratic, shifting, almost as if whatever was out there didn't fully exist in one place. Through their bond, William felt Kyara's unease sharpen. This place feels like it's watching us, she thought to him. William's grip on his weapon tightened. I was just thinking the same thing. A metallic creak echoed in the distance. Something had moved. Kyara's golden eyes snapped toward the source. There. She pointed toward the remains of a shattered tower, its skeletal frame stretching like blackened ribs into the sky. William adjusted his grip on his pulse rifle. Let's see who's home. They approached carefully, stepping over cracked metal plating and debris, their boots kicking up clouds of dust that had settled for centuries. Then they saw it. At the base of the tower, carved into the scorched metal, were symbols. Kyara sucked in a sharp breath. I recognize this writing. William crouched beside the etchings. What does it say? Kyara hesitated. Then, in a whisper, turn back. They see you. William felt a cold chill slide down his spine. Before he could respond, a sound shattered the silence, a voice. Low, raspy, inhuman, coming from above them. They both looked up, and something was staring back. It was perched along the shattered beams, a silhouette barely distinguishable from the ruins themselves. Tall, too tall. Its limbs were elongated, its body thin, yet something about its proportions was off. Its eyes, silver-black, just like the shadow consortium's envoy, glowed faintly, locked onto them with an intelligence too focused, too knowing. William's pulse spiked. Kyara's bioelectric field flared instinctively, a golden haze of energy forming around her body. The creature shifted, its head tilting unnaturally, and then it spoke. You should not be here. The voice rippled, carrying too many tones at once, as if multiple entities were speaking through a single mouth. William steadied his rifle. Who are you? The thing did not move. Instead, it whispered. You carry the bond. Kyara stiffened beside him. The creature leaned forward, its hollow eyes burning through them both. You should not exist. Then, without another word, it vanished. Gone. Like it had never been there. Silence fell over the ruins. William's heart was pounding. What the hell was that? Kyara was pale, her bioelectric field still flickering in agitation. She swallowed. Something ancient. William exhaled. His instincts screamed at him to leave. But he knew this thing recognized their bond. And that minute had answers. We keep going, he said. We find out what happened here. Kyara nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. Through the broken city, the whispers grew louder. Something had been watching Delmara 9 for a long time. And now? It was watching them. The ruins of Delmara 9 stretched endlessly before them, a graveyard of a civilization erased from history. The whispering winds carried no life, yet William could not shake the feeling that something was alive here, watching, waiting. Kyara walked beside him, silent but tense, her golden eyes scanning the twisted architecture. The presence of the thing in the tower still lingered in her mind, in their bond. It had spoken of their connection, as if it understood it better than they did. And that terrified her. William broke the silence. You recognized the language on that warning. Kyara nodded slowly. Not all of it. But some of the symbols were familiar. She hesitated, then admitted they match fragments of ancient Etherian records. The ones that predate our known history. William frowned. How ancient are we talking? Kyara's voice dropped lower. At least 30,000 years. William exhaled. Then whoever, whatever, left that message wasn't just warning people away recently. She shook her head. No. They were warning our ancestors. The life signs flickering on their scanners led them deeper into the ruins, toward a massive, partially buried structure. Unlike the crumbling towers around them, this building was intact, its surface black and seamlessly smooth, as if time itself had failed to erode it. William ran a hand along the cold surface. This doesn't match the rest of the architecture. Kyara crouched, tracing a gloved hand over symbols carved into the entrance. It's not Saran Dominion technology, she whispered. This is something older. A faint pulse vibrated beneath their feet. William's gut twisted. It's still active. Kiara's gaze met his. Then let's find out what's inside. The entrance was sealed, but as they approached, their bonded energy fields flared unexpectedly. The moment William's hand brushed the surface, the symbols lit up, a deep, unnatural crimson glow spreading like veins through the black stone. The structure shuddered. Then, with a low, grinding groan, the massive doors slid open, revealing a staircase leading into darkness. A cold wind rushed past them, carrying something with it. A voice. Faint. Echoing. Calling to them. William's fingers tightened around his weapon. He turned to Kyara. Still think this is a good idea? Her golden eyes were dark with resolve. No, she stepped forward. But we're already in too deep. Together, they descended. The staircase spiraled far deeper than it should have, winding into black stone corridors lined with alien glyphs. The deeper they went, the stronger the sense of pressure became, like an unseen weight pressing against their chests. The walls pulsed with faint red light, flickering like dying embers. And then they stepped into the main chamber. William stopped cold. At the center of the vast underground hall stood a massive, monolithic structure, an obsidian black slab, floating a few inches above the ground. Strange symbols pulsed across its surface, moving like living veins of fire. Kyara exhaled. This isn't a ruin. William finished the thought for her. It's a sealed vault. But sealed against what? Their answer came a second later. The air around them shifted, not with wind, but with something deeper, a ripple through reality itself. And then, across the chamber, a figure stepped forward. Not human, not Centurion, not Etherian. Something else entirely. Something impossibly old. It studied them with silver-black eyes. And then it spoke. You are not the first to come here. A pause. But you may be the last. William's grip tightened on his weapon as the figure emerged fully from the shadows. It stood tall and unnaturally slender, its form wrapped in layers of dark, flowing material that seemed to shift and ripple as if woven from the void itself. Its silver-black eyes, the same unnatural gaze as the Shadow Consortium's envoy, fixed on them, yet its face held no true expressions, no trace of what lay behind those alien features. Kyara's bioelectric field flared involuntarily, sending faint golden arcs of energy crackling across her skin. The figure took a single step forward, and the air itself seemed to ripple, as though reality had bent slightly to accommodate its presence. William's voice was steady, but every nerve in his body screamed at him to run. Who are you? The figure tilted its head. I am the Sentinel, the last of the Watchers. Kyara's breath caught. Watchers? The Sentinel's gaze turned to her. Your kind once called us by many names. But here, in this place, we were simply the ones who remained. William's mind worked rapidly, piecing together the implications. Delmara 9 had been wiped from existence. Not through war, not through plague, but through something else entirely. And now, here stood a survivor. A witness to whatever had happened. His gut twisted. Was this thing responsible? Kyara stepped forward, her voice cautious but firm. What happened to this world? The Sentinel studied her for a long moment before answering. They awoke something that could not be controlled. William and Kyara exchanged a glance. The Sentinel continued, its voice carrying the weight of centuries. The Saren Dominion sought knowledge buried beyond the reach of time. They wished to wield it, to break it, to make it their own. A pause. They failed. The black monolithic slab behind it pulsed, its veins of crimson light flaring brighter for a moment, as though responding to the words. William's pulse quickened. What did they find? The Sentinel's gaze flickered between them. Then it whispered. They found the first bond. Silence pressed against them. William's mind reeled. The first bond? What does that mean? The Sentinel stepped aside, gesturing toward the floating monolith. The answer is here, locked within the memory of this world. Kyara hesitated. Through their bond, William could feel her pulse quicken, her thoughts racing. Something about this place felt familiar to her. She swallowed. And if we don't open it? The Sentinel's silver-black eyes dimmed slightly. Then the cycle will continue. And your fate will end as theirs did. A low, distant hum began vibrating through the chamber, growing louder. Something was awakening. William took a slow breath, looking to Kyara. He felt the weight of her gaze, of the unspoken choice hanging between them. Their bond had led them here. And now, it was the key to unlocking whatever truth lay beyond this place. Together, he said. Kyara nodded. They stepped forward, their combined bioelectric fields pulsing as one, and touched the monolith. The world shattered, and the past screamed back to life. The moment their hands touched the monolith, a violent shockwave of energy erupted from its core. The crimson veins of light surged outward, racing along the walls of the chamber, illuminating the long-forgotten glyphs with an eerie, pulsating glow. William gasped as a force beyond time itself gripped him, dragging his consciousness into the depths of memory, a memory not his own. Kyara's hand clutched his as the world around them melted into something else entirely. And suddenly, they were not on Delmara 9 anymore. They stood in a place impossibly ancient, beneath twin suns that burned with unnatural blue fire. Before them stretched a city of impossibly high spires, their surfaces shimmering with raw energy, humming with the pulse of a civilization lost to history. Etherians, Centurions, humans, and others, beings neither of them recognized, their forms strange and shifting, their bodies woven from energy and light. Kyara's breath caught in her throat. This is before the war. William turned to her. What war? The answer came in the form of a deafening roar, a sound that was not sound but something deeper, something that tore at the fabric of existence itself. Above the shining city, the sky ripped apart. And they arrived. William and Kyara could only watch as massive figures descended from the void, beings wreathed in shadows deeper than darkness itself. They did not move in any natural way. They phased, flickered, appearing and vanishing between moments, like something that existed outside of time. And in their wake, the sky itself began to break apart. The inhabitants of this lost world, the Etherians, Centurions, and others, gathered in unity to stand against the invaders. The first and only time they had ever fought as one. Kyara clutched William's arm, horror dawning on her face. This is the truth they erased. William understood now. The Etherians and Centurions had not always been enemies. They had been allies. Once, before something, the Shadow Consortium, or what would become them, had broken them apart. And at the heart of it all, at the center of the ancient war that had shattered the stars, was a bond. A single shared energy field, the merging of two life forms, the first of its kind. William felt it now, deep in his own bones, in the very core of his connection to Kyara. This was why the consortium feared them. This was why they had tried to erase Delmara 9. Because here, in this dead city, the truth of what once was still lingered, waiting to be remembered. The vision fractured. The sky collapsed, and suddenly, William and Kyara were ripped back into reality, back into the chamber beneath Delmara 9. The sentinel stood before them, watching in silence. William's breath came hard and fast. He turned to Kyara, and through their bond, he felt the same realization settling into her. She whispered, "The consortium didn't create the divisions between our species. They just made sure they never healed." The sentinel finally spoke. "Now you understand." William's fists clenched. Why erase all of this? Why bury the truth? The sentinel tilted its head. Because they cannot allow the bond to return. It is the only force that they cannot control. The only power that can stand against them. William and Kyara exchanged a look. Their bond had formed against all odds. A connection between species that should never have been possible. But it was possible, because it had happened before. And the consortium had spent thousands of years making sure it would never happen again. A deep tremor shook the chamber. The sentinel's eyes flashed. "They know you have seen the truth." William turned back to the monolith, but its light was fading, the glyphs fracturing, the knowledge contained within already breaking apart. Kyara's voice was sharp. "They're trying to erase it again." Another shockwave rippled through the ruins. William acted on instinct. He grabbed Kyara's hand. Their bioelectric fields merged fully, a surge of power exploding outward, stabilizing the monolith just long enough to send one final pulse of information directly into their minds. Coordinates. A hidden signal. A message. The sentinel watched them silently, then stepped backward, fading into the shadows as if it had never been there at all. And then the chamber began to collapse. "Move!" William shouted. They ran. They barely made it back to the stealth cruiser as the ruins imploded behind them. The monolith, the city, the whispers of the past, all of it buried once more. But the truth? The truth was alive. Kyara sat in the co-pilot's chair, her face still pale. The coordinates. They lead to a system that doesn't exist on any map. William stared at the blinking display, feeling the weight of what they had uncovered. A hidden system. A lost world. The place where the first bond was truly formed. His hands tightened on the controls. "The consortium has spent centuries dividing the galaxy," he said quietly. erasing history, keeping us weak. He turned to Kyara. They're afraid of what we can do. Her golden eyes met his, unwavering. Then let's show them why. William engaged the thrusters. The ship rose through the stormy sky, breaking free of Delmara 9's grip. The past had been buried long enough. Now, it was time to bring it back to life. Together, they vanished into the stars, toward the final secret of the galaxy, toward the war the consortium thought they had already won. But the war had just begun. The end for now,